Assalamu alaikum. Hope so all of you are doing well. Today I am going to discuss chapter number 2, that is from the same novel, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Previously I have discussed some of its points that are related with its outline story, that are first punishment, the Deadlast family, and the Christmas dinner, and the punishment at school. Now we are going to discuss and read about from chapter number 2, and let us switch over this paragraph. But as soon as I continue my lecture, I would request from all of you people to subscribe my channel and hit the like button below, and don't forget to comment me if you want to share with me something new, or if you want to ask me, then ask me without any hesitation, and do comment me that these some of these pointers should be added in my lecture. Your comments, your subscription, your likes would give me enough confidence that I will get motivation to prepare with some other topics as well. So now let us discuss from let us start from reading chapter number 2. Uncle Charles. Uncle Charles was addicted to smoking tobacco in his pipe. Simon at last did not like the strong smell of tobacco, which seemed to him like that of gunpowder, and he decreed that Uncle Charles should henceforth smoke his pipe in the outhouse. Charles accepted the indignity cheerfully. During the summer vacation, Uncle Charles was the constant companion of Stephen, who was at home for the vacation. He accompanied the uncle when he went out for shopping, and also to the park, where he was given lessons in running for a former athlete like Flynn. At this period, Stephen began to enjoy the world of books. His most favorite book was The Count of Monte Cristo. Education interrupted. Mr. Dedla's financial condition suffered a great setback, and it was decided that Stephen should not be sent back to the expensive school. Various changes were made in the household to affect economy, and all these had a very depressing effect on the mind of the young boy. He began to indulge in reveries and dream about the time when he would outgrow boyhood and become a man. Further decline. As the family fortunes declined further, there were more humiliating changes. The family shifted from their present house to another one, which was shabby and much less comfortable. Moreover, Stephen's companion, Uncle Charles, was growing absent minded because of advanced age. Stephen retains memories of some of the incidents that occurred during this period of his life. All these memories are mingled with the presence of imaginary women who Stephen. Now this word should be pronounced as woman, not as a woman. Women means there are a lot of females at the same spot, but here where there is a singular, we must pronounce this word like a woman, and when there is plural, then it should be pronounced like women, whom Stephen has created in his mind. Now, as soon as my reading continues, and you would continue listening to my reading as well at the same time, then you must focus on the pronunciation of different words, and you must develop some grammatical concept in your mind at the same time. You must focus on the spellings of different words which are given in the passages. New school. As a result of the influence exercised by Simon Dadla, Stephen, as well as his younger brother, got admitted to a new preparatory school which was named Belvedere College. Stephen now felt quite superior, and this feeling of superiority was reflected in his treatment of the other boys at school. Stephen and another boy named Hiron became the unchallenged heroes of the school. Stephen is beaten. Stephen was accused by one of the teachers that he wrote. Now, one of the teachers means there are a lot of teacher, and the teacher um, who has beaten Stephen Deadlas was one of among them. So there is a plural, means one of teachers, not a teacher. One of the teachers means one of them has beaten and accused Stephen very badly, that he wrote a heretical sentiment in his weekly essays. He was publicly rebuked for this. Some boys took into their heads to punish Stephen further for his heresy. They caught hold of him a few days after the incident of this public rebuke. Stephen was walking along the road when he was stopped by three wolves. They were Hiron, Boland, and Nash. Stephen disliked the last two since Boland was nothing but a dunce and Nash was an idler. The boys questioned Stephen as to who is considered was the best poet and the best prose writer. Their aim was to trap Stephen into saying something which they could pounce upon as heretical. Stephen's reply was quite fearless and sincere. He replied that he believed that Byron was the best poet and Cardinal Newman was the greatest poet stylist. The boys commented that Byron was heretical and immoral. They insisted that he should withdraw his opinion about the greatness of Byron, but Stephen would not do that. Since he refused to do so, they beat him mercilessly with a stick and left him after insulting him, the schoolboy. Stephen remembers the night of the school play. His mind was once again occupied with the girl of his imagination. He believed that she was sitting among the audience. He did not like to play his own role in the play before her, since he regarded the role to be humiliating one. His role was that of a farcical teacher. After the play, he rushed away, feeling wounded and humiliated. The train ride. Stephen and his father travelled by train to the city of Cork. Mr. Dadlas was going there on business since he wanted to sell some of his property at auction, but he also wanted to familiarize his son with the places which were his haunts during his childhood. During the journey, he kept up a constant talk about his friends of old times. As he spoke, he would now and then take a gulp of brandy from his flask. Stephen paid not the least attention to the conversation of his father, who at last fell off to sleep. In the city, Stephen was taken to the college which his father had attended, namely Queen's College. He was led around the campus. The father told him stories about his class fellows, which he had repeated to him countless times before. Although altogether the visit left Stephen quite bored. Stephen wins a prize. Stephen won a prize at an essay contest. He spent the money to cheer up and entertain his family, which had fallen evil days. He took him to the theatre and also bought them expensive presents. This was, however, a brief excursion out of poverty, and life returned to the old routine soon after this. Stephen is seduced. Stephen's mind was full of fierce longing, and he wanted to break away from the drab atmosphere of his school as well as his home. One night he prowled the streets of the city like a savage beast. He also wandered through the quarter of the city in which brothels were situated. In one street, he saw a woman standing in a doorway. She stopped him and invited him into her room. Stephen surrendered him entirely to the young woman. Now, um, as my reading progresses, I would like to request from all of you people who are listening me very attentively and attending my reading lecture, um, to subscribe my channel, and don't forget to hit the like button below. And I would request to that improve your reading and listening communication at the same time. This reading from English literature, this not only increases your knowledge about or understanding about English, but at the same time it would proven as a very helpful material for those who are going to attempt different papers that are related with their syllabuses of BS or Masters in English Literature. So now I am going to jump over or switch over chapter number 3, Stephen's self-evaluation. As Stephen sat in the class, his mind was wandering to the thoughts of the evening meal and the pleasure he would have after that in the brothel. As he thought about himself, he had to admit that he was leading a wretched life and putting his soul in the danger of damnation. Yet it was also clear to him that he was not going to repent. He had stopped going to mass, but still led the prayers to Virgin Mary. I am going to inform you people that at the end of the novel I am not only going to discuss its important points, but also I am going to discuss the very meanings that are included in this novel, the very difficult pronunciation, and at the same time their meanings, their synonyms. At the end of the novel I will inshallah discuss with you, so don't worry and listen this reading very attentively, that you people may not fall any confusion after the reading of this whole novel, and that what happened to Stephen and who was that very girl and who was Mr. Charles, and what were those very terms that are included in this novel, what stream of consciousness and things like this and that, and who was Mr. Dolan, and who whipped Stephen, and things like this and that. There are so many things that are included in this novel, but I like those part where different terms and terminologies that are very 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 much important in the perspective of most important words. Okay, Stephen's self-evaluation. So be attentive. As Stephen sat in the class, his mind was wandering to the thoughts of the evening meal and the pleasure he would have after that in the brothel. As he thought about himself, he had to admit that he was leading a wretched life and putting his soul in the danger of damnation. Yet it was also clear to him that he was not going to repent. He had stopped going to mass, but still led the prayers to Virgin Mary. The retreat, a 3-day retreat, was to be observed in the honor of the patron saint of the school, and that is Saint Francis Xavier. During the retreat, the master exhorted them to observe meditative silence. He also spoke to them about death and damnation. To Stephen, it appeared that every word was specially addressed to him. He was put in mind of his sins, both big and small. His mind went to the dirty pictures which he kept and the indecent letters which he wrote and left out in the hope that some girl would read them. Terrors of Hell. The most terrible lecture was one on the nature of hell. The speaker dilated on all the tortures that the body was subjected to in hell. Stephen was greatly terrified by the lecture. It even appeared to him that he had died already and passed into hell with all its terror. But the presence of the teacher and his class fellows in the classroom convinced him that he was still alive. Stephen felt very humble, but dreaded the thought of having to put all his sinful experiences into words at the same time of confession. The final lecture. The final lecture was about the spiritual torments that the damned have to suffer in hell. The speaker explained that the first such torture that had to suffer was that of a feeling of loss, for they must realize that their sinfulness had deprived them of the loving care of God. The second agony they had to suffer was that of the everlasting reproaches of their own conscience. The third agony would be the realization that their tortures did not have a finite character but were infinite and timeless. He explained this by giving the examples of a bird who takes away a grain of sand out of a mountain of sand once every 1 million years. In the eyes of God, even a single sin was enormous. This is very eternal truth, and that if you commit a sin that is very and whose effects and single sin whose effects are very dangerous in a deeper meaning, so then they would destroy. Even if you go on praying, and if you are very pious, and if you had not committed any sin, or if you had not even tortured even a single body, and you would have fulfill all your obligation very carefully, but still you have committed a little sin that is very deep in its meaning, that it would ruin your whole pious life. So be careful and spend your life in this world as if you are a passenger, and be like that. Means do not be surrendered with so many luggages and with the luxury of this whole world. Be like that you are a Muslim, and you are leading a life of a Muslim, and you have to leave this world one day. So explain this and timeless. He explained this by giving the example of a bird who takes away a grain of sand out of a mountain of sand once every 1 million years. In the eyes of God, even a single sin was enormous. The lecture left Stephen thoroughly shaken. He tried to search and examine his conscience. He felt unequal to his task. In the evening, he went to a kindly old priest and made a full confession of his sins. He felt greatly relieved after this. He received Holy Communion the next morning, resolved to lead a new life after that. And now I am going to discuss chapter number 4, pious routine. Stephen's sense of sin made him go through a routine great piety. He underwent many sacraments and subjected body to mortification in order to subdue the flesh. He attended mass daily and said his prayers and recited the rosary which carried in his pocket. He succeeded, it appeared to him, bring every one of his senses under control through rigorous process of discipline. He began to believe in the real of love, for it seemed to him that God had forgiven him and granted him grace only because of his love for humanity. Stephen's control over self was not, however, undisputed. Sometimes doubts did enter his mind, or sometimes he wavered, and it was clear to him that sometimes within him was still tempted towards sinfulness, and that act of sin would undo all the spiritual gains which he made through great patience and perseverance. Means sometimes while reading and going through the writers that are not Muslims at all, that are maybe Christians, maybe belonging from another religion, but still their humanity, their ideas about or their views about humanity, means sometimes we Muslim begin to thought that whether we are truly Muslim, whether we are living a very pious life, whether our surroundings, whether our own people or whether our gathering among whom we are leading a life, whether they are um, living happily or they are very peaceful and happy with us, with our behavior, with our sayings, with whatever they are we are doing, they are happy and sad. Not though we are living this life as a single person, but we should be very careful that our deeds must not torture any single one. We should be very careful towards the rights of humanity as well, because we are ourselves are human beings, and if we want to enjoy the rights from the state, then it is our duty to respect and to fulfill all those rights that government or that other society members are expected from us. So sometimes while going through their lines, my mind started thinking that whether these people who are not human, that who had not read Quran Pak, or who have no knowledge about prayers and things like that, but their humanity sometimes teaches us something more. Means at the same time we must be very careful that those who have no knowledge about our holy books but still are very worth while people, and we must appreciate such people. So these lines means gains which he have made through great patience and perseverance, means it it seems that after attending those priestly sermons, he had developed some consciousness and torture that came after thinking and our thinking over this thing, that even a single sin would lead him towards the eternal damnation of hell. So be very careful. So, priestly vocation. The director of the school was greatly impressed Stephen's discipline and piety. He invited him to his office to talk. He suggested to Stephen that he seemed to him to be out for the vocation of a priest and wanted to know if Stephen would like to join this profession. For the time being, the calling of a priest appeared to Stephen to be a very attractive one, but he believed that he was suited to his this vocation. He was pleased with himself that he should be considered fit by director for such a lofty calling. Later reflection, however, convinced him that he was under an illusion and that he must not think of becoming a priest. He was able to make up mind to banish the thoughts of this vocation. He also began have renewed fears that he might fall from the state of what from the state of grace. For it was with the utmost difficulty that one was able to avoid such a fall even for the briefest time. He also recalled that his family was making a great sacrifice for his education, and this made him feel a great remorse towards his brothers and sisters. The family was deeper in debt than ever, but Stephen's father was nevertheless determined to educate him at the university. Epiphany. Stephen was having one of the now this is the term that I have already discussed in my previous lecture. If you have attended them very carefully, then you people may understand this very notion or this very concept, that what is epiphany and what he was meant by epiphany. Now Stephen was having one of his usual walks by the seashore. His friend invited him to have a swim, and Stephen suddenly recalled that his namesake in the Greek myth of Daedalus was a famous artificer. He imagined himself to be soaring in the sky, and the thought made him tremble with thrill and excitement. It seemed that he had received the call to live, and his soul had suddenly awakened from the grave where it lay confined during his boyhood. His moving into water was the beginning of his voyage of self-discovery. He saw a pretty girl ahead of him in the water, and he gazed on her face for a long time. The sight seemed to make a spiritual change in him. Stephen had suddenly been able to see himself and his life with the utmost clarity. He now knew that he must do with his life. Stephen's companions. Stephen had struck out an intimate friendship with a fellow student named Cranley, who shares most of his aesthetic and literary interest. Um, in fact, the relationship between the two of them is more like that between a priest and his disciple. Stephen confides his innermost longings and aspirations freely to Cranley. Another of Stephen's companions is named Devon. He is an Irish nationalist, and Stephen has a rather low opinion of his intelligence. Still, he feels irresistibly attracted towards this man, for he speaks a very picturesque language, which is a mixture of quaint Elizabethan expressions and vigorous Irish idioms. Stephen begins to consciously imitate the style of Devon. He and Devon have a strange encounter when they are out for an evening walk one day. Stephen's aesthetic theory. Stephen has a discussion with the Dean of Studies about the relative claims of the useful art and the fine arts. The conversation shifted to the nature and goal of art. Stephen said that the object of the artist was the creation of the beautiful, which he defined as those things whose perception pleases the mind. Stephen's aesthetic theory is largely derived from Aquinas. He believed that the creative artist is concerned only with the creation of the beautiful, whereas the productive artist is concerned with the production of the good and useful. Art, he believed, must produce a stasis in the observer, and it all only ends in the satisfaction of the aesthetic sense of beholder. Art which produces movement or kinesis is only useful art, like rhetoric, and not like fine art like poetry. The perception of the beautiful requires wholeness, harmony, and clarity. All art can be classified as lyrical, epical, or dramatic. So the task of the artist is not to portray anything which he observes very minutely as it is. The work of artist is to create something something very unique, that if someone sees his art or her art, then we people as a viewer of his object would be at once stumbled. Means it's not the copy of something, it's his unique art. Its function is to facilitate the thoughts and the moods and the life of some other people. So chapter number 5, Stephen at the university. Stephen has now joined the university. It is morning and Stephen is late for class. Okay, sorry. thought of the girl, the pretty girl whom Stephen had seen on the seashore, continually haunts his imagination. He composes a poem to her. Seeing the birds flying high in the sky, Stephen is once again reminded of Daedalus and cherishes the dream of flying like his mythical namesake. It seems to him to be imperative that he must renounce his home, his country, and his church in order to achieve emancipation. Once Stephen sees the girl and follows her over a short distance. Now, chapter number 5, Stephen at the university. Stephen has now joined the university. It is morning and Stephen is late for class. His father shouts at him for his laziness. His mother agrees that university life has changed him. Stephen has now emerged as a full grown intellectual who is absorbed in the search for beauty and the essence of art. Cranley, fellow student, shares his aesthetic interest. Stephen becomes a kind of disciple who before the priest-like figure of Cranley and confides in him all the secret longing of his heart. Cranley is of a serious bent of mind in contrast with Stephen, other companion at the university. These companions are mentioned throughout the chapter and various encounters are described. Devon is one such companion. An ardent Irish nationalist, Stephen considers him a dull-witted, loyal serf, but Stephen, always fascinated with language and the sound of words and intrigued by Devon's speech, an interesting mixture of Elizabethan English and quaint Irish idioms. Devon's description of an incident after a hurling match provides Joyce with an opportunity to demonstrate his proficiency in imitating the Irish vernacular speech. The incident is about a lonely walk home late one night, during which Devon stops at an isolated cottage to ask for a mug of water. The peasant woman who answers the door terrifies the young student by her mysterious manner and her urgent request that he should come in and spend the night with her. He leaves quickly but can never forget the incident. Discussion about art. Now this one paragraph is my most favorite throughout literature. Then they begin to describe art and the work of artists. Means as a student we must develop this technique in our mind that one day that we are not here just to attend those lectures dull-mindedly and attend our university at the boring mood, but we must develop this thing in our mind, and we must remember this thing in our mind that our mind must be like an artist. One day we are expected to as the youth of our country, one day we are expected to explore something new that would stumble the whole universe. That means something very very useful, like Google, who converted the whole world like a globe. Means wherever you are sitting, wherever you are, you convey your thoughts, you convey your feelings, you convey your art, you convey whatever you are trying to convey, whatever you are trying to do your with your this IT or this facility, whatever you wanted to are trying to do. So your art must like this. Google means who explore and then converted something very useful thing for our whole generation. So our mind must not like a very dull minded. We must be like those who have a great burden on their shoulders, and we are expected that we will one day explore something new, something very useful Okay, discussion about art. After describing the incident with Damon, Joyce returns to the morning describes at the beginning of the chapter when Stephen was setting up for the class. Upon arrival, Stephen goes to the physics theater and meets the dean of studies who is lighting a fire in the hut. A discussion follows in which they talk about the useful arts like lighting a fire as against the liberal arts, which leads to the theoretical discourse on the object of the artist. Stephen says that the object of the artist must be the creation of the beautiful, and the dean asks Stephen what he considers the beautiful, quoting from his favorite source, Thomas Aquinas. Now, this word must be pronounced like Thomas, not Thomas. It's a Thomas Aquinas. And Stephen states that those things are beautiful, the perception of which pleases. Stephen is seriously concerned to have a clear conception of the basic questionnaire, art and literature. He attempts to formulate his own aesthetic philosophy and he uses various persons, the Dean Cranley Lynch, to test his ideas. He tells the Dean that he uses the ideas of Aquinas as a lamp to light his own thinking. There can be no such thing as free thinking. He maintains for all thinking may be bound by its own laws. Stephen's discussion with the ends with the dean ends as the physics professor and the other student enter to the hall and the class begins. As the professor lectures, Stephen watches with disapproval as his fellow students carry on their jokes and rough plays. Stephen as his companion. After the class, Stephen meets Cranley. A group of students are busy enlisting students to sign a petition for sorry disarmament and world peace. Stephen says that the matter is of no interest to him. Temple, one of the more emotional members of the group, walks up with Stephen and Cranley, firing questions at Stephen's, whose knowledge obviously impresses him. Devon and another student named Lynch joined Stephen and Cranley as they watch a hurling match. Stephen denounces Devon Blind's patriotism, saying that he does not share the other strong allegiance to his country. Ireland is an old sow that eats her farrow. He concludes coldly he is certain that one need not make any sacrifices for such a country. On the other hand, he is determined to leave it. Lynch and Stephen separate from the others, and Stephen begins to hold forth on his aesthetic philosophy. His philosophy, which he refers to as applied Aquinas, follows. A Stephen aesthetic. The cardinal principles of Stephen's aesthetic are derived from Saint Thomas Aquinas. They are those things are beautiful, the perception of which pleases. Okay. So, if you seize one thing and your mind couldn't understand the presence of that very particular thing, then how could you define that thing which is meant to give the player or mentally peacefulness to other people, that very particular thing from where you couldn't find out any particular thing, how that very particular thing could give you will give you a sense of pleasure. So in order to extract the pleasure from that very particular object, you must go on thinking about that very thing, and then you may feel that the creation of everything in this whole universe is has some objectives, means they are not created uselessly. Everything in this whole world has some deeper meaning and some hidden meaning, and if you have a wisdom, then you as a wise people must search over it. Now the good is that towards which the appetite tends. That implies that the creative artist is concerned only with the creation of the beautiful, that the productive artist is concerned with the production of the good. Other elements in Stephen's theory are indebted to Greek thought. Art must produce a stasis in the observer. That is not, that isn't. Now stasis, this very literary term I have already discussed in my previous reading lectures. If you have attended them very carefully and attentively, then you would at once your mind would realize the meaning of that very particular thing, that what is kinesis, what is stasis, what is stream of consciousness, what is epiphany, I think like this and that. Satisfaction of an aesthetics. And stasis means stationariness. Art should not be kinetic, that is, it should not produce an emotion such as desire or loathing. If it does so, it assumes the function of a useful art such as rhetoric. Kinetic means causing movement. Three things are necessary for the perception of the beautiful. These also show influence of Greek thought: wholeness or integrity, harmony or proportion, clarity or radiance. Okay, so wholeness or integrity means your art must be have a beginning, middle and end. Harmony means one. If you are going to discuss a story, so your art must be so much composed and so much clear that one incident of your story match with the another one. Means if hero was born, so your another chapter must not begin with this, that in which there is no conception of the hero. Means there is harmony, there is clearness, there is clarity, at the same time there is the wholeness and there is the proportion. Example, Stephen uses the example of a basket and elaborates on the three things necessary for the perception of the beautiful. First, one sees the basket as one thing, then one perceives it as a thing with parts, harmony. Finally, one perceives it as a thing with parts, harmony. Finally, one sees it as that thing and no other thing, clarity. Stephen explains two links that beauty and truth produce a stasis in the mind of the observer. He quotes Plato: beauty is the splendor of the truth. Means those who are going to speak and tell truth all the time, this means they then created some place in the hearts of other people, that people might develop this consciousness or this notion or this thing that that very particular person is very beautiful because he always tells the truth. So we should be at the same time very truthful with the nature, that the observer who reads and who is viewing our art, he must realize that the beauty in it, and then he must perceive this thing, that this thing is also beautiful, but that very particular person who has created this piece of art, who is more beautiful because he is having a more beautiful heart and mind in his soul. So the beauty is that, the beauty is the splendor of the truth. Forms of art, as they proceed on their when divides arts into progression of three forms: lyrical and dramatic and poetic. Okay, the lyrical, the image is centered is in immediate relation to the artist himself in this category of art. The image is presented an immediate relation to others, to the artist, and to others in this type of art. It is not entirely subjective like the first. The image is presented in immediate relations to other. The artist's personality is refined out of existence in this type of art. It is entirely impersonal. So the poem, as it begins to rain, Lynch and Stephen goes to the library. Lynch point out Stephen girl as she works off with her companion. Stephen watches her closely with at calling to her and pays no attention to his friend's conversation. He is lost in thought about the girl. When he meets Stephens again, he is composing. He is lying in bed early one morning with pencil and paper, composing stanzas of words for a vanilla. The girl who is so frequently mentioned in Stephen's thought is the subject of the poem. He calls to mind the many times that they have been together over the past 10 years, that many years have passed since the tram rides together. He finally writes about the stanzas of the completed villainy in honor of the girl. Now there is a repetition, and there is the girl who is repeated again. I don't know even who is that very particular. Maybe the imagination of Stephen Dedlas, or may he has he had seen that very particular girl, and it might be that he had not succeeded to to own this girl as his wife, or maybe his beloved, and things like this. There are so many perceptions. So it's up to the reader's mind that what he perceives, that very particular notion that the writer or artist, what he wanted to convey or communicate with other people. Stephen's resolve. The scene changes abruptly, and he wanted and Stephen standing on the steps of the library, watching the birds circling above his head. It reminds him again of the flight of Daedalus. Stephen resolved that he must leave not only his home but his church and his country. In contrast with Stephen's seriousness, other students are frivolous. A group of them is seen again on the library steps, Dixon, Temple, Glen, Cranley, and Stephen. Stephen sees the girl again and follows her for a short distance as his companion discuss where unbaptized infants go after death. Some believe that they go to the region called limbo. Dispute over with mother. Stephens asks Cranley to step away from the group, and he explains that he has had an argument about religion and his mother. She had asked him to make his Easter duty, that is to go to mass and communion. Stephens refuses to do this and repeats to Cranley the non-serviam of Lucifer, I will not serve. The analytical Cranley points out the irony of Stephens' mentally involvement with the religion in which he no longer believes. They discuss Stephen's parents. He loves his mother but considers his family father merely a preserver of his own past. Stephen does not want to hurt his mother, but he cannot sacrifice his principle either. Cranley tells Stephen that he should grant his mother her request, since Stephen apparently does not take the religious rituals seriously. Stephen retorts that he neither believes nor disbelieves, but admit that he is not sure enough of his disbelief to risk making a sacrilegious communion. Stephens respects the forms and rituals of the church by refusing to observe them. In answer to Cranley, he states that he does not intend to become a Protestant forsaking a logical and coherent absurdity for an illogical and incoherent one. He believes that he must go away in order to have complete spiritual freedom, where principles and inner freedom are concerned. Stephen is resolved to sacrifice everything that interferes in a strong statement of his intention. He declares that he cannot serve that in which he no longer believes. Whether it be church, home, or country, he will live as best as he can, defending himself with the only arms. He allows himself silence, exile, and cunning. Moreover, he does not fear to be alone or forsaken, or to make a mistake, even a mistake as long as eternity. Stephen's diary. The last section of the book consists of series of dated entries in Stephen's diary as he prepares to leave Ireland. The first one is dated March 20th, and his last entry is made on April 27th. Stephens describes his final meeting with Lynch, Cranley, and Damon, and writes down his own thoughts and impressions in brief journalistic phrases. He tells his mother that he cannot return to the church, he cannot repent. He describes his last meeting with his girlfriend, at which both are nervous and remote. Stephens feigns as a self-assured detachment. He turns on his spiritual heroic refrigerating apparatus, invented and patented in all countries by Dante Alighieri, thereby associating his protracted romance with the unrealized ideals love of Dante and Beatrice. The last entry of the novel is one. The very last lines we are going to discuss from this paragraph. The last entry of the novel is one in which he invokes his ancient mythic father Daedalus for inspiration. April 26th, so be it, welcome, O life. I go to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience and to forge in the smithy of my soul and uncreated conscience of my race. April 27th, Father, old artificer, stand me now and ever in good stead. Thus, like Stephen Daedalus, Stephen has at last spread his wings in order to fly away from the prisons of Dublin as the Daedalus escaped from Crete. Now this is the end of our reading. Hope so that you people have understand the gist of my reading and the novel, the very particular novel where there is consciousness and conscience and the eternal repetition of hell and damnation and tortures of hell, that that there is no escape, there is no way to escape from the worries of this world. If you want to live a very truthful person, if you want to gain a success, then you would have to encounter by hook or by crook, by this and that, you will have to encounter with all those realities one day, if you want them or if you don't want them. Then there is no escape for you, there is no flying wings, there is nothing that would take you miles away from that very particular incident from which you are trying to escape. So try to encounter with them very patiently and very bravely. So our eternal hell and damnation of hell mean, if you do not understand the realities of life, and if you go on committing sin, and if you have the awareness that this thing, that very particular thing that you are committing in this whole very particular world and in which you are living, where you are living, so then you would have to enter into the hell and damnation of hell. You would have to face them one day. But if you committed some sins without the realization of that very particular sin, then after some day, as the day passes, so your mind began to think that no, you have committed something wrong against the law and against the law of nature. Then this is the right time that you would stop committing such kind of deeds like Stephen Daedalus. Even though those things are very shining like pearls that are lying in the waves of ocean and this and that. So I am going to discuss my lecture with the hope that you people have understand my reading fully, and with the hope that you people would like it. At the same time, with the request that subscribe my channel, and don't forget to hit the like button below, and if you have liked something, then comment me in the comment box. Till then, I am going to end my lecture with the prayer that wherever you are living, wherever you people are listening me, wherever you are attending these lectures very patiently and very carefully, you people would live very peacefully and happily at the same time. So I am going to end, and till then, be happy, be satisfied with your life, and create some goals in your mind. Okay, Allah Hafiz, meet you in the next video. Take care. Assalamu alaikum. Hope so all of you are doing well.